Hey guys, this is Alexandra from iloveknots.com. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make a buffalo plaid plastic canvas coaster. For this project I'm using 7 count plastic canvas mesh. Mine is ultra stiff, but you could use the regular one. This is just what I had sitting in my stash. I have scissors, a tapestry needle, jewelry pliers. You don't need these, but these are really helpful. You're also going to need worsted weight yarn. I usually use Red Heart Super Saver or a similar acrylic yarn for all my plastic canvas projects. Last year I made a placemat with Red Heart Super Saver and it got a little bit fuzzy around the edges. So I want to try working with 100% cotton for this project just to see how it turns out. This is We Crochet Dishy yarn. I have black, white, and this dark gray is called Ash. My buffalo plaid is going to be these 3 colors. You can replace them with whatever colors you want your squares to be. I wanted to show you the difference between yarns. I wanted to use 100% cotton because I wanted to see if it would be more durable and not fuzz up as quickly as the 100% acrylic. So I've made this little coaster in the 100% cotton and I'm going to test it out. I was really concerned at first that there was going to be too much space in between the stitches. Here you can see in this gray, you can see a lot of clear. This We Crochet Dishy yarn is a little bit thinner than, let's say, Lily Sugar and Cream. Lily Sugar and Cream probably would have filled in the spaces a little bit better. From a distance, you can't even notice those spaces, but up close you can see them. This is what it looks like with acrylic yarn. I think wool yarn would be exactly the same. It fills in those spaces really well because the yarn isn't quite as compressed. It's a little bit fluffier, whereas the cotton yarn is straighter. So I'm still happy with how my coaster turned out. But I think my next sample will be worked in maybe We Crochet Swish, which is 100% merino wool. And then I'll see how well that holds up. But I just wanted to show you these two side by side so you could see the difference. This piece of paper right here is my pattern. Let me push this aside. I hand draw all my charts. So this is my chart. The red boxes are white. Then I have gray and black. You'll find this chart on my blog, iloveknots.com. I will link to this chart in the description below. It's a little bit busy, but don't let that discourage you because this project is super easy. If you've never followed a plastic canvas pattern chart, we're using the Continental Stitch pattern. Each one of these holes represents a hole on the plastic mesh, and each one of these dashes represents a stitch. I'm going to show you how to stitch this. Typically, I would not cut this out. I would just stitch it first and then cut it out after so I don't have to count. But I would like to show you how to cut it out, so I will do that. We count each one of these little holes down here. For our coaster we need 26 holes wide by 26 holes tall. There's 26 holes. I am only going to cut one prong here. Then I'm going to go back and I'm going to count again. If you have a marker of some sort, you can make a line there instead of cutting it. There's 26. Now I'm going to count 26 up, and I'm going to do it as I'm cutting. And when we're cutting it outside of the last square we need. So this square right here is number 26, and I'm cutting right outside that last square so I get that straight edge there. And when you do it, it makes the other side not jagged, but it's not even. You would cut that off before you would start your next project. There's 26. Now I'm going to cut just past it. So I have 26 full boxes there, and then I'll cut across. Just following that straight edge that's there. And here's our little square. Should be about 3 3/4 inches big or so. I'm going to start with white. So I'm going to take my yarn. I'm going to pull a long strand out. And then I'll trim it from the ball. Then I'll thread that into my tapestry needle. I just pulled the tail end through just a little bit so it doesn't pull out. And I'm going to take my square, starting in the bottom left corner, in the second box from the left side. I'm counting up. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 holes up, second hole in from the bottom left corner, and I'm inserting my needle from the wrong side, pulling it through, and I'm going to pull my yarn all the way through until I get to the tail end. So now I'm close here. I'm going to line that tail end up vertically here. Since I'm going to create a box here, I'm going to stitch over this tail end so it doesn't come out. So I just have it laying on the back side vertically in between that first and second box there. And I'm going to continue to hold it with my index finger as I work. I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to go diagonally down, insert it into that box, and pull the needle through and all that yarn. There's my first stitch. Then I'm going to insert my needle from the wrong side into the stitch in the second box underneath where my first one was. And I'm going to do it to the right of that tail end that I'm holding with my index finger because I want to sandwich it in between. And then I'll pull that through all the way. And now I'll insert my needle diagonally downward. So all your stitches are going to be slanted. And I'm pulling my yarn all the way through. Then I'll insert my needle from the wrong side in that second box underneath the top stitch I worked. And I'm pulling it and the yarn all the way through, and I'm making sure when I inserted my hook there it was to the right of that beginning tail because I want to sandwich it in there. And I'm going to continue working diagonally downward. And sometimes we get knots, so we'll have to take care of that. And here I'm in my last box, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4. I have one more diagonal stitch here. And now my beginning tail is secured in there underneath those stitches. I have one row done of 5 stitches and my yarn is coming out of the bottom. I'm going to go back to the top into the next box over from my first stitch and pull my needle and yarn through. And then I'll hold the tension on the back side with my ring finger, holding the tension of that yarn strand that I just pulled through. And then I'm going to do the same exact thing, sandwich that in between my stitches, so I'll go directly downward to create my first stitch. Then I'll insert from the wrong side just to the right of that tail that I pulled up. And I'm just continuing to do the same exact process of diagonal stitches, sandwiching that strand in between my stitches. And I want to make sure I have 5 stitches. The boxes are going to be 5 stitches wide by 5 stitches tall. There's 5 stitches. There's my second row. I'm going to continue doing that so that I have 5 stitches wide by 5 stitches tall, bringing that tail end over each time and then stitching over it. There's my last stitch. I have 5 stitches tall by 5 stitches wide. I'm going to flip my plastic canvas over to the wrong side, and I'm going to just insert my needle underneath those stitches all the way up, to secure my yarn, I'm going to pull it all the way through. This is where those jewelry pliers come in handy. Make sure that the eye of the needle is facing you so you can see directly down, as opposed to it being turned the other way where you can't see in it. You want it to be with the eye facing you because it's flatter. Then you can take your jewelry pliers and you can grab the needle, hold the fabric with your left hand, and then pull the needle through. And as soon as it's through, then you can use your hands to just continue pulling all the way through. Then I just give it a tug to make sure it's tight, and now I can fasten it off. You can also carry your yarn through where you would do your entire box, and then you would have like a float on the back where the other color would be, and then start your next box. That's up to you, however you want to do it. I like to fasten it off after the end so I have less bulk in those other colors, and so that there isn't a chance of that color showing through. You could have also started at the top here, inserting your needle into the second stitch from the top left, and then working 5 stitches downward. That's a little bit easier to work your box there and then work downward. It doesn't require you to count up these stitches, though it's not difficult. I'm going to continue working with this white until I run out of it, and then I'll switch to the gray that I would need for this box here on the top and on the right. So following that top stitch that I have, here is the last stitch on the top. Then I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 boxes over. And I'm going to insert my needle from the wrong side. I'm going to pull my yarn through just till I get to the end of the tail. Without pulling it through, I'm so close it almost came out. And then I'll hold it here and I'll work my first row of my next box. Just the same exact way as you did the first box. I'm going to go ahead and do that off camera. I've just finished my second box with 5 stitches by 5 stitches. Then I'll flip it to the wrong side, insert my needle from the back side, just up through all those stitches there vertically, and pull my needle through and all the yarn. Give it a tug, and now I'm going to fasten off. I still have tons of yarn left, so I'm going to continue on the white. Here's the top of my last row there. I'm going to count over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 boxes. Pull my needle and yarn through, capture my tail end, and I'm going to create my next box. Now I have 3 white boxes along the bottom. I'm going to continue with the white yarn that I still have left on my needle. You could change it, but I just work until I run out. It's easier that way. I'm going to go to the top of the square where I probably should have started. I'm not sure why I started in the bottom left corner, but you can start it anywhere. This is the easiest place to start. So I'm going into the second box from the top left. And then I'm just going to work down 5 stitches. So there's 5 white stitches. Then I'll just bring that yarn strand over and up to the top next box and continue working until I have another square complete. I'm going to work this top line exactly how I worked the bottom line, and there will be 3 white boxes on top as well. I've reached the end of my white. I don't have enough to work another row, so I'm just going to go ahead and fasten it off the same way as I would have done before, working it up that vertical strand. Tug on it and then fasten off. Now next time I pull the white yarn, I'm going to have to just make sure that I add that last row in there, which will be really easy to do. I'm going to switch colors over to the gray now. I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to cut a long strand to work with. Then I'll thread that into my tapestry needle here. Just leaving a short end there. And now I'm ready to work my next set of boxes. In between the whites are going to be gray. And I'll do it the same exact way as I did before. So here's that top stitch. Pull my yarn all the way through. Hold that tail end with my finger on the wrong side. And then stitch over it. And I insert my needle down and then back up in the same motion, and then I grab the needle and pull it through. It's one less step that you have to do. Insert it diagonally downward, pull it a little bit, and then if I have to, move the strands out of my way, insert it into the other hole of my next stitch and pull it upwards. You can do it whichever way works the best for you. There's my first row in gray. I'm going to go ahead and finish this box. I'll also work the box here on the right, and I will work the 2 boxes in between the white on the top as well. And if I have yarn left, then I'll come back and show you how to work the next row. I was able to finish 4 boxes, and I still have plenty of gray left, so the top row and the bottom row are finished. The next place where gray is going to be is right underneath the white box here. So I'm going to go to the second line and bring my needle through. And just the same exact way as I've done all my other boxes, I'm going to work another box of 5 boxes by 5 boxes. After I finish this one, I'll count over, and my next gray box will be under this middle top white box. And then after I finish that box, my next gray box will be under this right top white box. I had enough gray to complete 2 more boxes here, and I ran out, so I'm just going to switch colors now. I do that just so I don't get bored. Pull the black. I'm going to pull a long strand to work with. Thread that into my needle. And this is where you're really going to see our pattern start showing. The pattern is top row, white box, gray box, white box, gray box, white box. The second row is gray box, black box, gray box, black box, gray box. The next row will repeat from the top again, white, gray, white, gray, white. Underneath that, we'll repeat the second row again, gray, black, gray, black, gray. So I'm just going to get us started here with the black. And then I'm going to work down exactly as I did all my boxes. They're all worked the same exact way. And there's our black. I'm going to go ahead and work the rest off camera until I fill in my whole square, and then I'll come back and show you how to work the border. I just finished my black and now I've gone back to the white. Before we get to the border, I just want to show you two things real quick. I want to show you how to add your yarn on and what I do with my needle whenever I want to take a break. So you could just start over for this final line like you would any other box, but I find that without having that strand that pulls over to the top, it has a gap in between those two lines, and I don't want that. I want it to look seamless and mimic the rest of the stitches. So I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to insert it horizontally right under all those stitches on the bottom of that box. So here's the back side of the box. I just ran my needle underneath those bottom stitches, and I'm going to pull it all the way out, and I'm going to leave my yarn tail under those stitches. Now I'm going to take my needle, run it up under that bottom stitch, pull it all the way through, and now my tail is secured on the back, and I've come out the same exact place as I would if I had just continued working my box. So I'll flip it back to the right side, and I'll start right here at the top, and now I'm ready to work down. And if you look from the wrong side, there's that strand coming up. Let me work a couple stitches here. Now let's say it's time for me to take a break. I've worked enough, I don't want to work anymore right now. I take my needle, I insert it into a stitch, any stitch on the edge, or even here you could do it. Then I run under several and I come out a different stitch. And now my needle is secure in there. It's not going to go anywhere, I can put it down, I don't have to worry about trying to find my needle later. Then when I'm ready to go, I just pull it out and continue with my stitches. Now I'm going to work all the rest of my boxes off camera, and when I come back I will show you how to do the border. I haven't quite made it to the border yet. I put these black ones down here in the wrong place. They need to be up here, or they need to be here in the middle just like they are up here. So I figured while I was here I would show you how to take it out. I'm looking now from the wrong side. I'm going to go to one of the ends where my tails are, either the beginning or the end, it doesn't matter. And then I'm just going to insert my needle in between the stitches. The stitches are these horizontal lines. If I insert into a vertical line, I can pull that strand through. And now that strand is loose. Now I can go back to the right side, and I can just use my needle to put it underneath a stitch and pull it through. So I'm going to work my way through both of these two black squares down here, complete the stitching here, and then I'll be back. I've made it to the border. The inside of the square is all finished. My border, I'm going to do it in black. I'm only going to show part of it, so I'll attach my yarn over here and I'll work the corner and a little bit down. The reason why I'm picking this darker color to start is because I'm going to weave my yarn underneath it. So I'm not going to go down the first line since that's where I have my yarn tail in. I'm going to go up the second line. And it's a little bit tough, so your jewelry pliers, this is a great place to use them. There, my black is secured under several stitches. From the right side, you're not going to see that black. Alright, I'm going to come up. So right now, My yarn is in between the first and second box of that square. I'm going to insert my needle into the second hole of that square. Now I'm going to work counterclockwise. So I'm just going to fold it over the top, insert into the square to the left, pull my needle and yarn through. Then I'll bring that yarn around the top. And when I do that, on the back side, I'm holding the yarn tension with my index finger and my middle finger. I like to do 2 stitches along the border so that it fills in the spaces a little bit better. So here's my second one into that square. Now I'll go into that next white square, pull that yarn around the top, insert back into that white square. This is whip stitching. We are going to whip stitch for the entire border. I just want to show you how to do the corner. I've reached the corner box. You don't have to do 2 stitches in each stitch around the coaster. I always do, regardless of what yarn I use, because I like to fill it in. Otherwise I feel like you can see too much of the canvas. In this corner stitch, I'll do my first pass in there, just as normal. Now I'm going to insert again, and when I pull it through the second time, I want to pull the yarn strand over the edge, the corner edge, the point. I'm going to cover it with my yarn. Then I'll insert one more time. And this is a little tricky transition, so I'm holding the pointy edge as I let go with my left hand, and now I can pull that over to the left side. So there's 3 stitches here in this corner stitch, and that's just so we have coverage of that pointy edge. And then I keep going down the line, working my 2 stitches per stitch. And you can use your fingers if you need more coverage or to make that stitch more even. But there's our corner. I'm going to continue working all the way around until I get to the beginning, and then I'll show you how to finish off. Almost there. I ran out of yarn for my border, so I wanted to show you how to add more yarn on. Here's the strand where I ran out. I'm going to leave that there for a moment. I'm going to weave in a new strand just the same as I did before, right here in this gray. And it's a different angle, but instead of going up through those stitches there, I'm going to go across. Here my yarn is secured there. Now I'll turn it back to the front side. I'm going to take that yarn that I fastened off, or the yarn that I ran out, and I'm going to bring it around the top. Then I'll take my tapestry needle, so I'm holding that strand on the back right here. I'm going to work 1 stitch here in that stitch to the right. And before I bring that around, now I'm going to take that strand and I'm going to just lay it across here, across the back, where I will work the rest of my border. And I'm going to stitch over it. So I'll bring my yarn over the top as normal, insert my needle back into that stitch. I'm working the second stitch in that one, bring it around. And now as I work, I'm just going to work sandwiching that tail in between. And I won't need as much yarn as there, like it's sticking out of the sides, so I'm going to go ahead and trim it back a little bit. But now I'll keep working here, and as I work, I'm just going to insert my needle right underneath that strand and stitch over it. Alright, I've just worked my last stitch in the box before my first stitch. There's 2 stitches in that box. I'm going to work one more stitch into the first box. It'll come out to the right of the first stitch that we worked, and that'll close up that gap in between those 2 boxes. Then I'll just turn it to the wrong side, and I'll weave my end all the way down underneath stitches. And since I didn't have tension on that, I just want to make sure my stitch placement goes into the right spot. And I'll just do that with my finger. And now we're done. Fasten off. Throw that to the side. Here's my new coaster. Ready to be the new home of your favorite drink. Guys, thanks so much for watching my video. You can find the chart and the pattern linked in the description below. Make sure to check out iloveknots.com for free crochet patterns, knitting patterns, plastic canvas patterns. Smash that like button and hit subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next video.